Good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks for joining us for this, the first webinar from the APM Risk Management Interest Group, and hopefully the first of many. My name is Russell Tarver. I'm an experienced project and program management consultant with BMT HiQ Sigma, where I specialize in risk management for complex programs. I will be hosting the webinar today and answering any questions at the end of the session. Our main presenter today is Estelle Detrembleur from CH2M Consultants, where she is currently working as a risk consultant on the Thames Tideway project. This webinar is aimed at those who work in projects but who are new to risk management or non-risk management specialists. Estelle is going to cover some of the history of risk management, explain the why and what and how of risk management, and touch on some of the basic techniques used to make projects more successful. We both represent the APM Risk SIG, which is long established and exists to promote the successful application of a risk management discipline within the project environment in support of the APM's vision of a world where all projects succeed. Before I hand over to Estelle, I have some brief housekeeping notices to do. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the SIG community page and the APM YouTube page shortly after it finishes. Likewise, the presentation, which will be available on the community page and the APM SlideShare page. Unfortunately, delegates are not able to ask questions verbally during the presentation. However, if they would like a question answered, please use the question box facility within the webinar software, and we will try to respond to all the questions during the webinar if they are of a technical nature, or at the Q&A session at the end. If we run out of time, then those questions will be collated, summarized, and answered and published on the Risk SIG community page in due course. A survey will be sent out to those attending, and it would be appreciated if you could complete this so that we can improve future webinars. And finally, CPD certificates are not issued for webinars. Therefore, delegates should self-assess on their CPD records if required. So, without further ado, I'll hand you over to Estelle.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today I will introduce you to the origin of risk management and how this function influenced today's project management by using the channel tunnel as an example. Then we will look at the risk management process, the use of the quantitative risk analysis, and conclude with lessons learned. So the Renaissance, literally meaning rebirth in French, was best known for the artistic development, but the Renaissance was also a time for invention and innovation. People focused on evidence and developed different methods and ways of doing things. These methods were used in various fields as astronomy, physics, biology, and anatomy. In parallel, engineers developed technological risk management models. Risk management was initially formalized in late 50s. DuPont Industries introduced the process safety management system in science and engineering. This best practice was spread through the oil and gas industry, and they introduced the Monte Carlo analysis. So this is used in modern risk analysis and will be explained later in the presentation. They also introduced the ASOP studies. Best practice from industries became a norm in UK in the mid-60s, and risk management was fully established in early 70s. In the 1990s, there was more development in engineering, and some international regulations started to be put in place. And in UK, the Cadbury Committee was created in 1981. In the same time, the financial institution developed international risk management model, and this was to protect themselves from unanticipated risk. In 2002, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, also known as SOX, established internal controls and procedures for financial reporting, and this was to reduce the possibility of corporate fraud in USA initially, before the practice spread across the world. The expression, "don't put all your eggs in one basket," is certainly not new, and Harry Markowitz, an American economist, demonstrated mathematically why putting all eggs in the same basket is a risk, and why organizations should diversify in strategy. So now, let's look at the case study. The channel tunnel, or in French, le tunnel sous la Manche, as you may know, the idea for cross channels appeared as early as 1802, and the real attempt was made in 1880. So the technology, even really advanced at the time, was not reliable and was not offering great security to the workers as today's day. Since then, the industry improved the work conditions and promote better well-being standards in the industry. So the tunnel under the sea started at Shakespeare Cliff in UK and Sandgate in France. Unfortunately, due to political issues and the news mentioning that the national security may be compromised, the progress of the tunnel was stopped. They found intact segments of the early tunnel on each side in the UK in 1987 and in France in 1958, and it was about 1.8 kilometre. So since the UK has joined the European Union in 1973 in the common market, just to remind you, the idea is for people, the goods and the services to move freely across the borders. It would make sense to reinitiate the idea of the Channel Tunnel. So the French and the British government organized a competition in 1985, and here on the slides, on the top left and the middle one, are two other designs that were proposed. The one on the left is an island. They proposed an island on each side of the channel combined with a bridge, and the one right in the middle is a bridge combined with a tunnel. So as we all know today, this successful project is the Eurotunnel, and you have two illustrations of the project right at the bottom of the slide. So the idea is that the two external tunnels allow passenger train, and the middle tunnel is reserved for freight. So the project was about £5.5 billion, and at the time it was one of the most expensive construction projects ever proposed. And the final cost came to 9.5 billion. So this was twice as much as the predicted budget, and it opened as well 1 year late. So this is why risk management is so important, and this helped to predict increase in cost and delay in program. So new technology and more adapted machine have been used to build the tunnel since the early attempt in 1880, and here on the top right you can see a more recent TBM model. The Eurotunnel construction began in 1988 and opened in 1994. Since its construction, the tunnel has faced several problems, and during the first year of operation, the Eurotunnel unfortunately recorded a loss of £925 million, which is about 10% of the end cost. And more than once, both the fire and the cold weather have disrupted its operation. Also, it caused minor diplomatic disagreements when the security of the country has raised concerns with the Schengen area. You must remember some illegal immigrants have attempted to use the tunnel to enter the UK. To complete the project successfully, the project management team will focus on how to achieve the project objectives within a time and budget. So what can possibly go wrong? When you look at this slide, you can see the organization matrix is complex, and many stakeholders and parties are involved in the process. So in the case of the Eurotunnel, the British and the French government created an alliance and defined the project objectives and needs. So it may be difficult as the two countries have different opinion on why the project needs to be delivered. You need to look how to set the responsibilities, not only for the money loss, but also for who take the benefits. Another theme to be looked at are the regulation, where the law is applied and when. So if we think about health and safety regulation, those may differ from France and UK in the case of the Eurotunnel. So many organizations would have internal governance to follow, and the internal politics could slow down the delivery of the program. A little slip may cause big damages to the reputation of your project and recreate doubt in the client's mind, but also to the member of the public on how the project can be delivered. So worst come to worst, the company or the project may be put at risk and cannot be awarded new contract in the future. Since the contractor skills come from various parts of the world, it can also bring issue as you get lost in translation. I'm thinking, what about one simple one is the instruction to the workforce, and this can increase incidents on site. Or what about your material specification? Do they comply with the regulation of the country? The business culture as well may be different, and the foreign exchange may cause some issues when the market and legislations change. Be aware that project may focus on commercial or financial objectives, and safety and quality should always be a priority. So implement a lessons learned platform to help your team to achieve by setting up a system that helps controlling performance, quality, health and safety, and costs. Here, the table illustrates the scales of major projects across the government. So you have about 149 projects in the major project portfolio, and the estimated costs are about £511 billion. So as mentioned before, there may be a challenge to keep up with the benefits without exceeding the budgets. Look around you, especially in the London area. There are a number of major projects out there, and they are risky. They are also very complex, not only with regards to the construction methodology, but stakeholder relationship and challenging targets related to your cost and time. So they are costly, as I just said, and they're worth billions of pounds for development, and they are high profile as they are involving the government in many decisions. All of these projects are independent of each other and help the community in different ways. It can increase the transport capacity and economic growth in certain areas with Crossrail and HS2, or improve water quality and environmental management with Tideway. So to give you a scale of these projects, here are a few numbers. HS2 phase 1 and 2 budget is £60 billion. They will be creating about 350 miles of new track, 9 new stations and 2 new depots. Crossrail, £15 billion, 10 new stations across London and 26 miles of new tunnels. Tideway, £4.2 billion, 16 miles of new tunnel and privately funded at £3.14 billion. And this has been ultimately paid by Thames Water ratepayers. So these three projects is about £80 billion and worth 15.6% of the major project portfolio. Several of these projects have used new planning consent approaches, royal assent in the case of HS2, and a development consent application on Tideway. Now more than ever, the reputation of major projects is exposed to bad publicity, especially with the growth of the social media, which create challenges. This is a risk that no one would have thought, like even a few years ago. Therefore, stakeholders and community engagement at early stage is really vital, especially when you wish to attract investors. And this was successfully demonstrated by Tideway. But substantial challenges remain, especially given that 71% of the 149 projects are due to be delivered by 2019-2020. So on this slide, you can see the risk management definition from the APM. But in other words, risk management is a process that helps managing an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on a project objectives. One of the roles of the risk manager is to communicate on a regular basis with the project team to keep up about what's going on. Another key aspect is to create and manage a risk register. This information needs to be recorded either in a database or an Excel spreadsheet, and I will tell you a bit more about this shortly. Mitigation action will be allocated to the project team to demonstrate how risks are managed on the project. The risks are reviewed on a periodic basis. They will be analyzed and based on current knowledge and updated accordingly to the risk register. let's look at the risk process. There are 5 different phases. So identify, assess, analyze, create some responsive action, and monitor. So remember, all risk analysis will be influenced by the business risk appetite. So what drives your business? Is that the cost, the program, any design related? So to help you identify the risk, you will look at the scope and the constraint of your program. Ask yourself a few questions. What would you need to deliver? Is this a tunnel or is this a system? Is this also a combination of those two? How complex is your project? Who are the parties involved and how will you deliver your project? Where will you deliver? Is there any constraint on your site with the neighborhood, the logistics, or the consents? Then you can arrange a one-to-one interview or a group workshop with specialists. Workshop encourage collaborative working and ensure that the experience and the knowledge is shared and utilized to capture the risks. Be conscious that we have bias. We have previous jobs, we worked in different organizations, and we have potential personal beliefs. And this influences the way we see the world and how we're going to make the decision. The most common instances are being either over-optimistic or over-pessimistic in achieving a task. So when you have identified your risk, the next step is to assess them. The risk exposure and the level of uncertainty will be based on the experience, the skills, and the judgment of your team. So you can choose between 2 types of assessment. Create a simple assessment. So by a prioritizing scoring scheme, you can just set up from very low to very high rate. And this is best defined by a probability or impact grid. You can select other qualitative criteria or as how costly they are, or if they have an impact on the environment, the quality, health and safety, or any other time scale. Or you can do a full analysis and you include a Monte Carlo analysis or any other advanced risk modeling. To do the full analysis, you will start to link your risk to task in the program, all of which involve cost and time impact. To help you with the assessment process, learning from previous projects is a good start, and this will help you to build your risk profile. It is important to involve your cost estimating team or the commercial team as soon as possible in the process, and to keep interacting with them during the project to ensure the accuracy of the input into your model. More than one workshop may be necessary to complete the assessment of this risk. And when your assessment is completed, then you can run either a QCRA or combine with a QSRA on the overall risk of your project. So QCRA standing for Quantitative Cost Risk Analysis and QSRA for Quantitative Schedule Risk Analysis. The results will assist you in developing strategies to mitigate your risk on the project, and we provide an overview on how the stated risk impacts the program. And I will develop again these 2 concepts a bit later in the presentation. Then we need to think how to respond to these risks, how threats can be mitigated, or how opportunities can be exploited. In other terms, what are the actions I need to take to reduce the risk impact before the risk develops? Or in the case of an opportunity, what action can I take to make the opportunity more likely to occur or to have a greater positive impact if it does occur? Some risks can be reduced or avoided when you develop exactly how you can mitigate them. The standard APM responses are to avoid, reduce, transfer, accept and exploit or realize, enhance, share or accept the risk. Then on a regular basis, you should review the risk with your project team The risk exposure can be reduced or increased depending on how well the project responds to the mitigation action and other elements influencing the risk. Remember what drives your project and keep an eye on your risk management plan, as this is the document that supports the way you are managing your risk on your project. Regular review should align with your reporting cycle and other requirements on the project. So a cycle of a monthly or a quarterly review are necessary. The main challenge is to keep the project team involved and engaged with your process, and remember they are the owner of the risk register. Also think about how to cascade the information to your project manager, the leadership team, or the board. To what level do you need to communicate the information? Is this for operational decision, tactical decision, or strategic decision level? So now we have a vote, and if you can please give us your thoughts on how strongly you agree with the statement, how to get an efficient risk management process. So you need to get the risk management policy, and the document will explain the approach to risk management at the business level. What are the roles and responsibilities of the board and other key parties? The document will also outline key aspects of the risk management process and identifies the main reporting procedures. The risk management plan, as I mentioned before, will define how the risk will be managed on your project. You will need to size the opportunities, as compliance-driven approaches to managing risk are no longer enough to keep the pace with innovation, performance incentive, and business goal. Risk management functions needs to be stretched across the organization and need to provide the leadership team and their board of directors an overview on how rapidly emerging events will impact operation, the quality, and ultimately the shareholders' value. So let's look now at the risk register and how we can create one. So there are two different approaches on how you can effectively manage your risks. Probably the size of your project will direct you to the choice of either using an Excel spreadsheet to record your risk or a database for more complex projects. On the slide you can see two different Excel templates because it will differ according to your project, and you can choose different criteria for your risk register. Most of us will interface with Excel on a daily basis, and basic formula can produce the required output. The output can be easily introduced and included as part of a presentation or in a dashboard. What may be difficult is to keep a track of your revision and ensuring that you generate a unique ID for each risk. Also, you might get some questions such as who has worked on this document last, or where and when it was saved. So you might not be sure that you are working on the latest revision. This condition can create issues when you need to generate your reports. If your project can afford and justify a dedicated risk management tool, then the database can be customized to your project. It will generate automatically a unique number for your risk, and you can manage the user accounts, set folders to suit the program that you are working on. So on the slide you will see a window of that database, and on the left hand side you will see a list of different folders. So this can be specified to your project. You can also easily extract your information on your regular basis for quality check, but also to generate your report. Other issues may arise such as the number of user accounts that may be required for your project, and that may increase the cost. And also maybe another question that you need to ask to your team is, have you got the resources, the skills and the knowledge to use the database? Although this may not be cost effective on small projects, but it is worth looking at this option for projects that involve a bit of complexity. So whatever the system you would choose for your project, make sure that it's suitable for the project size, ensure that information is recorded to the same standard across the project, with the unique number for each risk, and that you are able to control the access for audit trail. So let's look now at the quantitative risk analysis. Remember that during your assessment, the risk manager has worked with the subject matter expert to define the most accurate cost impact and probability range for each risk identified. When all this information has been recorded in your risk register, the risk manager will then confirm the information populated with the risk owner. Most of the time we are using a 3-point estimate, and the values are minimum, most likely, and maximum. There are other alternatives available if required, such as the uniform and the PERT analysis, but this is another whole webinar and we can discuss that later. Once the assessment is completed and agreed, the risk manager can then undertake the required Monte Carlo analysis, and to do so there are many tools available on the market. So that can help to calculate the risk exposure and to provide results to the project team. I've got an example which actually is showing an output from at risk. The quantitative method is always best when most of the data are available, or when your information available can be transformed into numerical figures, and if some data are missing, you can use a semi-quantitative analysis, and if you have no data, the qualitative method is best. So just as I mentioned, so here this is the at-risk output report. So at-risk is a recognized tool in the industry, and once you have set the model and choose your distribution and run the simulation once, this is now set for the rest of your project. On the top left, you have an histogram showing the overall distribution of the data set, and below you have a cumulative view, also known as the S-curve of the same data set. Commonly, the project team will be reporting on the P50 and perhaps a higher value such as the P80. I have highlighted this value here in the red rectangle. When you get your result from the data analyzed, the meaning of the P50 is the estimate value that you have a 50% chance of achieving, taking into account the element that you have included in the model. So if an organization budget for its project based on the P50, then all of the things being equal, they might expect for half of their project to complete under the budget, and the other half maybe. The higher value in this example, the P80, may be used to express a more pessimistic outlook on your budget required, and to complete the project So in this example, based on the element modeled, the budget required to have an 80% probability of completing the project within that budget. So why should we run a schedule risk analysis? Project plans or schedules are of course about planning the future, and everything about the future has some uncertainty associated with it. When a task duration is estimated to be 5 days, you may realize that the task duration may vary in the course of your project. So any estimate of a project completion is just an estimate. There may be a small amount of uncertainty or a large amount in achieving your plan, but there is definitely some uncertainty. Since there are many tasks, it is almost certain that many of them will take less time and the other part will take more time than estimated. So to complete this task, the risk manager will work closely with the planning manager and the project manager. The risks that may have an impact on the program are then linked to the task on the schedule. Then the risk manager will undertake a check of the logic in the analysis tool. For example, Oracle Primavera Risk Analysis or Predict Risk Analyzer, known as PRA, are other tools, and you have also many other tools available. So the duration uncertainty is applied, and the risk register is created in PRA, taken from the project risk register, which can be imported entirely. So once the logic has been proven and there is no need for more adjustment, the risk manager can apply the level of uncertainty to those activities as defined in the risk register. The risk manager then runs the schedule through PRA tools and review the output with the schedule and the project manager. So here you have an example of the output from the QSRA, and the QSRA should be seen as an opportunity to predict and therefore address your schedule slippage. The results help the PM to minimize the potential impact on the high probability and high impact risks. It is common practice for the output to be of post-mitigated QSRA to be used to actively drive your project or your program performance. So the P80 date is maintained as a finish date, and the project team are committed to meet the P50 date. So what have we learned? Risk is inherent in everything we do, and risk management can be applied to all projects regardless the size or their complexity. Risk can either have a negative impact on achieving your objectives, called a threat, or a positive impact, which are called opportunity. Understanding the complexity of your project and the constraints and uncertainties will assist you in taking a balanced and relevant proactive approach. Effective risk management is a key discipline at delivery, operational or strategic level. So establishing your risk management process will assist the project team in delivering the project safely, effectively, within the budget and on time. Lessons from the past project have set the rules from performance safety to the quantitative analysis. So think about the 5 key principles that we've just been running through. So identify, assess, analyze, create some responses, and monitor your risk. How good are these principles and how they can help you to predict your project completion? Think as well about identifying the bias, understanding the project requirement and objectives. Make sure that you have tools available to you and your team to generate your risk register, and ensure that you got the right skills as well to run your analysis. So make sure you develop an effective mechanism to prioritize the risk in your risk register and use the quantitative to qualitative analysis or a combination of the two. And this will be an opportunity to predict and therefore address the cost and schedule slippage. And remember, the project team owns the risk register. So to conclude, major projects make a real difference to people, and delivering much needed infrastructure as Tideway or Crossrail have transformed the public services. Today, with the Eurotunnel, the journey has made shorter, and it takes only 2 hours for you to go from London to Paris or Brussels. So many of these major infrastructure involved engineering challenges, new methodologies, new technologies, and innovation of any sort. New technology may increase safety on sites, but also can increase the level of non-visible risks. Think about the evolution of the internet and the increase of threat of cyber attack. Remember, human beings often tend to be either over-optimistic or over-pessimistic. The outcome of most of the risk we take, as well as all the risk we create, depend on the decision of other human beings. Understand your bias at any stage in your project is a key. Clearly, we cannot put the future data into the computer because we don't know those data. So instead, we are using past data which are only available to us, and this will fuel our models. Some projects are better suited with qualitative risk assessment, and the other one maybe use a quantitative approach. So for instance, if the project success depends on actions, such as getting so many people to attend an event, then the qualitative approach will be best. On the other hand, if success depends on hitting financial objectives, it's usually more appropriate to use the quantitative method. So throughout this webinar, hopefully you have come to realize that managing risk on a project is essential in order to achieve or exceed the project objectives. The key is the capacity of people to imagine anything different. So this is now concluding the presentation on risk management, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Estelle, and hopefully our attendees today found something of interest in there. I'm now going to attempt to tackle the questions that people are posing online. So thank you for those. I'll come back to those in a second. First of all, I'd just like to mention the vote that we had halfway through the presentation. The question was, is risk management practice supported by the board or the senior management in your organisation? And many of you responded, thank you for that. About 50% of you said that yes, it was supported strongly by your senior management. That's very good news because, as we all know, all processes need senior buy-in and behaviours and attitudes all flow down from the top. So it's encouraging to hear that of all the attendees today, 50% of you think that your management have got buy-in. On the negative side, unfortunately, 14% said no. That's quite worrying. It perhaps explains why so many of our projects still fail and why perhaps education is needed at all levels as to why risk management is important within the project discipline. So thank you for your feedback on that. We'll be publishing all of this information on our website after the session. I'm now going to attempt to answer some of the questions that have been placed. Okay, so our first question is from Joanna. She wants to know when tracking risks in a RAID log, that's an RAID log I think, do you also record and monitor assumptions, issues, decisions, dependencies in the RAID? My understanding, if I've got this right, is that a RAID log is it's an acronym, it's referring to risks, assumptions, issues and dependencies. Also sometimes there's an O on there for opportunities. So really the reason these are all lumped together is that they are all in some ways different forms of ways of looking at uncertainty or risk. So risks and opportunities are obviously, we're talking about threats and opportunities there really. So they're the sort of two sides of the coin, positive and negative. Assumptions are the planning assumptions we have in our project, and if you have a very unstable assumption, that could be seen as a risk or might be the source of a risk. So that's one way of looking at it. Also, the D in RAID is dependencies, and where you're dependent on another individual or organisation or department, then in many ways there's some uncertainty around that as well. So that could also be seen as a risk. So I think a lot of organisations wrap up all those things, risks, assumptions, issues, dependencies and opportunities into one place, although other organisations separate them out. So they're all basically key important things when planning and running a project. So thank you for that, Joanna. Next question is from Caroline. It says, if a project team does not include a risk manager, should responsibility for risk management fall on the project manager? Difficult question to answer. It really depends on your organisation, probably on the scale of your organisation. I would say that a single sort of fact is that ultimately the project manager is responsible for the project. If they don't have a dedicated risk manager or indeed a dedicated planning manager or cost manager, then ultimately the project manager needs to take the responsibility for all those things, which might be satisfactory on a very small project where you're dealing with a very simple project maybe. On a complex project, really, you really do require a risk manager, I would say, as you should also have a planning manager and all the other functions if you're dealing with a complex project or one of a large scale. But ultimately, the project manager is responsible for the project. So I guess hopefully that answers your question, Caroline. The next question is from Vibesh. He asks, what are the key factors to decide which analysis tool to use? I think he's asking whether to use Spreadsheet, risk database versus simulation tools. I think, again, it's probably to do with the scale of your project and resources you have available. But at the core of it, it's whatever tool you've got, you're using the same core risk management sort of principles. So it is possible to run risk management using a simple Excel spreadsheet. Maybe keeping it simple is a good thing. And if it's helping you to focus on your risks and really understand them, which is the most important thing, I think, really it's understanding what is the core of the risk, what are you talking about. And if you really understand the actual risk, then you've got much more chance of designing mitigation actions, which is ultimately one of the primary purposes of doing risk management. However, I would recommend if you are working on a more complex or large-scale project that one of the many risk tools that are out there are preferable, especially if it's an organisation, a kind of enterprise organisation where you've got multiple projects within one organisation, and you can all use a common risk tool. And also, you won't be able to do things like quantitative risk analysis that Estelle was talking about if you're using a simple spreadsheet. There are specialist spreadsheet tools available, for example, at Risk, which is a kind of an add-on, or the dedicated risk tools are ideal. Next question, which is quite a tricky one. Could I describe the Monte Carlo analysis technique? I think this is one I might have to answer after the question session. We'll be publishing all answers to these questions on our website afterwards. I will give it a quick go. Monte Carlo analysis is basically, it's a bit like playing a computer game with your project. So what you're doing is you're simulating your project time and time again, maybe many different iterations of your project. And in some of those iterations, you'll kind of get lucky. So you're using your 3-point estimates to say whether a particular cost or a particular activity comes in, takes more money or less money, or takes longer or is shorter than your estimate. And sometimes you'll run through a simulation of your project and you'll get lucky and project will come in under budget or under schedule, and sometimes you'll get unlucky and your risks will impact and your uncertainty will come in on the high side, and you'll have a break through your budget and break through your schedule. And so if you simulate that before you start your project, maybe 1,000 times, for example, and then plot all those results on a graph, it gives you a much more sophisticated understanding of the possible outcomes of your project, rather than just a simple, what we call a deterministic plan, which is just a simple plan on a page that gives you a single answer as to when your project will finish. So Monte Carlo gives you a much more sophisticated view of what could go right and what could go wrong, and it allows you to make more sophisticated decisions on the basis of that. I would recommend you come to our answers afterwards. We'll be typing this up and I'll put a more comprehensive answer in there. Or indeed, I have Wikipedia'd it myself, and I can tell you that the Monte Carlo entry on Wikipedia is pretty good, so that's also worth a look. Next question is whether we can recommend some dedicated risk management tools. That's from Caroline. If you go on our website, we have this is the Risk SIG website on the APM, go for the APM website. We have a list of available tools with some information about their different pluses, minuses, their capabilities. So I would recommend you go and have a look at that first. I wouldn't want to recommend a particular tool without understanding your project. Next question, and I'm going to have to wrap it up fairly soon, I'm afraid. We're running out of time. From David, and he wants to know how important is it to develop contingency plans in order to be prepared for the possibility of a risk actually materializing. I think, as a simple answer, is very important. Arguably, preparing the mitigation plans is the most important stage of risk management, because otherwise you have something we might call risk admiration, where you spend a lot of effort identifying, understanding your risk, but if you don't take any action to mitigate them, to reduce them, or to realize or exploit your opportunities, then you're not really getting the value out of your risk management. You might be getting some better forecasts, but you're not really taking action to make your project potentially more successful. So really, I mean, at the heart of risk management, I would say 2 steps almost, if you had to boil it down, is 1, understand your risks, and then 2, do something about them. So definitely important to do contingency plans. Can you give some techniques for managing known unknowns? That's a question from Chris Hawkins. If people remember, there was a famous speech by Donald Rumsfeld who talked about known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. It's all quite confusing, but known unknowns is basically when, and this applies to a lot of, it's very common in risk registers, where what you've got is someone has identified something that they're worried about, but what they're really worried about is that they don't know, they're missing information, they don't know anything about it. So I would call that potentially an ambiguity risk. So, and the first stage with any risk where you really, it's just that you don't have enough information to really clearly articulate your risk. You know you're worried about something, but you don't know exactly what the details are. Then really the first step is to find out more. So it's a bit of a simplistic answer maybe, but where you have known unknowns, really the first step is to highlight which areas are ambiguous about the information you've got, and seek out specialist, SME advice, dig into those things, and find out as soon as possible more information. And then you'll be able to take a more standard risk management approach, the sort of treat, exploit, accept, kind of the standard APM terminology for how to deal with the risk. So known unknowns, it's all about finding out more before you start. It's worth sort of, I quite like to label things as known unknowns, because that really highlights that you've got some missing information. Okay, unfortunately we've had some more questions coming in, but we're running out of time now. What we'll do is we'll take these questions offline, and I'll make sure that an answer is published on our website. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you very much to Estelle for her presentation. That just leaves me to encourage you all to visit the Risk SIG web pages for more information, and to look out for upcoming events, including our next major conference, which will be held in September this year, on the theme of the new Victorian age of mega projects. So thank you again for your time, and apologies to those whose questions I wasn't able to answer. Please go to our website for those answers and for any future information. So thank you everyone. That's the end of our presentation this afternoon, and I'd like to wish you good afternoon.